Hi all, welcome to the third lecture on sexual reproduction in flowering plants. In this lecture, we are going to discuss about the process of pollination, that is the transfer of male gametophyte onto the stigma, which lead to the fertilization and the post-fertilization changes afterwards. So before going into the details of pollination, we'll just look into the question which we have seen in the last lecture. The first question is, you are asked to find out the number of chromosomes in the various cells of garden pea. So for this, the first thing is the garden pea is having 14 chromosomes in the diploid condition, that is 2n equals to 14. This is the thing is. So now if you know the ploidy of all these cells, you can directly find out the chromosome number. So the functional megaspore, which is the result of meiosis division, it will be haploid. Therefore the chromosome number is 7. Megaspore mother cell is diploid. Therefore the chromosome number is 14. Nucellus. See, in one ovule, except the embryo sac. Inside the embryo sac, you can find totally 8 nuclei. So except the nuclei present inside this or cells present inside this embryo sac, all the cells in the ovule will be diploid only. So the nucellus is the part of this. Therefore, it is again diploid. So therefore, the chromosome number is 14. Polar nucleus. So in one embryo sac, this is the polar nucleus is. Each polar nucleus will be haploid only. But when the question is about secondary nucleus, which is the fusion product of these two, then it will be diploid. So the polar nucleus is haploid, therefore the chromosome number is 7. Synergid, which is haploid again, 7. Endothelial cell of anther. So in the anther, only the pollen grains produced as a result of meiosis or microspores produced as a result of meiosis, the remaining part of the anther will be again diploid only. Therefore, endothelial cell also diploid only. Therefore, the chromosome number will be 14. Meiocyte is the cell which is going to undergo meiotic division. So, it is again diploid. Therefore, the chromosome number is 14. Megaspore diode cells. When you just look into this, megaspore is undergoing the first round of meiosis. So if this is the megaspore mother cell, it will undergo the first round of meiosis to produce two cells. As the first round of meiosis is the result of true reduction division, the two cells produced will be haploid only. This is what the megaspore diode is. So the megaspore diode will be haploid only. After this, again each cell will again undergo the second round of meiosis, which is equivalent to the mitosis equational division. There, two haploid cells from this and two haploid cells from this will be produced. So the number of chromosomes in the megaspore diode cell will be 7. Generative cell, which is again haploid, therefore the chromosome number is 7. Vegetative cell is also haploid, therefore the number of chromosomes is again 7. The number of meiotic divisions and mitotic divisions involved in the formation of. So this one is about the number of the different components from the corresponding mother cells. So from whatever the corresponding mother cell is there, from there the number is asked. So the first one is the number of embryo sacs when you just look into that. So one megaspore mother cell will produce only one embryo sac. So for the formation of one embryo sac, one reduction division is required. Now coming to the formation of 100 embryo sacs, 100 meiotic divisions are required because each meiotic division can produce only one embryo sac. So the number of meiotic divisions in this case is 1 here, 100 in this case. Now coming to the mitotic divisions, this is where the mitotic divisions will occur. Here totally 3 rounds of mitosis is required for the formation of one embryo sac from one megaspore. So for the formation of one embryo sac, totally 3 mitotic divisions are required. So it is right. So for the formation of totally 100 embryo sacs, so 100 into 3, so 300 mitotic divisions are required. That's the answer is. Now coming to the pollen grain, for the formation of 1 to 4 pollen grains, one reduction division is enough. So each, if the question is about one pollen grain, then one reduction division. If the question is about two pollen grains, one reduction division only. If three, one reduction division only. And if it is four, also one reduction division only. But after that, for the formation of, say, for example, 5 pollen grains, it will be two reduction divisions. Minimum of two reduction divisions are required. That is, two meiotic divisions are required. So like this, when you just calculate for the 100 pollen grains, so 100 by each meiotic division will produce 4 pollen grains. Therefore, so a minimum of 25 meiotic divisions are required. Here it is one reduction division. Now coming to the mitotic divisions, one microspore has to undergo first round of mitosis, second round of mitosis, means two rounds of mitosis for the formation of the three-celled stage. So the question is about three-celled stage. If it is two-celled stage, it is only one mitotic division. But if it is three-celled stage, it has to be two rounds of mitosis. So the answer is one meiotic division and two mitotic divisions for one pollen grain, 25 meiotic divisions, and see, coming to the mitotic divisions, you can ignore this one. Now from this, if one pollen grain has to form from this, again it has to undergo two rounds of mitosis. From this again two, from this again two. Like this, if 100 pollen grains have to be formed, each pollen grain will produce as a result of two rounds of mitosis. Therefore, it is 100 into 2. Therefore, it is 200 mitotic divisions. So these are all the answers for the question which you have seen in the earlier lecture. Now coming to the present lecture, that is the pollination process. So our the present part of discussion will be this, that is how the pollen grain reaches the female gametophyte in the process of pollination. So we are going to discuss this particular part. So in the case of algae, bryophyta, pteridophyta, the lower plant divisions, we know that the male gametes will be motile because they possess the flagella and they are motile. Sometimes in the case of algae, the female gametes also can be motile, but in general, all the three groups when I just consider, the male gametes are motile as they possess flagella. So the motile flagellated male gametes can be transported to the female gamete through water. So water is necessary for the transport of male gametes in this case. That is the reason why you need these three divisions. All the plants of these three divisions require water at the time of fertilization. Pteridophytes, which are actually true land plants, still they require water at the time of fertilization. So that is one thing. Now coming to the gymnosperms and angiosperms, so they'll produce non-flagellated male gametes. Exceptions are there, few species, but most of the species will produce non-flagellated male gametes only. And these male gametes are present inside the pollen grain. That is male gametophyte. So the male gametophyte will be transported. Therefore, the male gametes present inside that will be transported. So the process of that is actually the pollination is. So it's a transfer of pollen grain that possess these male gametes is what the pollination is. So it's the transfer of pollen grain from the anther onto the stigma of an ovary. In the case of gymnosperms, there is no ovary, stigma and all these things. The ovules are naked there. So therefore the pollination in the case of gymnosperms is transport of pollen grain directly to the ovule. So no stigma there. So we are looking into the definition in the case of angiosperms. Next, here in the case of angiosperms, when you just compare with the gymnosperms, the chances of pollination are always more. The reason is angiosperms possess flowers. In the case of gymnosperms, the pollination will be through anemophily. That is, the wind can help in the transport of pollen grains. That is, anemophily is. But in the case of angiosperms, anemophily is there, but majority of the angiospermic plants will be pollinated through entomophily. That is, the insects can help in the transport. Apart from that, there is ornithophily, and apart from that, there is chiropterophily. So different types of pollinations are there. So how these flowers can help in the increased chances of pollination? When you just look into that particular aspect, as the flowers possess colors, they can attract the pollinating agents. As the flowers possess nectar, they can provide reward for the pollinating agent, therefore it will get pollinated. Or it may release some scents, therefore it will get pollinated. So the flower can always help in the pollination process, and it will always increase the chance of pollination. So the advantages of the flowers. So as we know from gymnosperms and angiosperms, one important evolutionary change that happened is formation of flowers. So the flowers will always increase the chance of gamete transfer is one important thing regarding the flowers. That's why the angiosperms are so successful when compared to the lower plant divisions. Next thing is the ovary, which is present surrounding the ovule. So as we have seen in the gynoecium part, the ovule is actually present inside the ovary, and after the fertilization, this ovary is going to develop into pericarp, that is fruit wall. So fruit is produced, which you don't see in the case of gymnosperms. These fruits can provide the nutrition to the animals, therefore the seeds will get dispersed. Or sometimes the fruits may possess certain modifications that can help in the attachment of these fruit with the different animals and will get dispersed. So for example, in the case of xanthium, so in the xanthium there are stiff hooks on the surface of the fruit, therefore there is zoochory inside that. So zoochory is the dispersal of the fruits with the animals. So presence of ovary, therefore the formation of fruit will always help in the dispersal of the plant. So this dispersal can help in the survival of the species by reducing the competition. So there are basically three different types of pollinations depending on source of pollen grains. The first one is autogamy. So here in this autogamy, the pollen grains are transported from the anther of a flower to the stigma of the same flower. That is, within the flower there is pollination. That is autogamy. Whereas in the case of geitonogamy, the pollen grain from the anther of a flower to the stigma of the flower of the same plant. That is, from one flower to the other flower there is a transport of pollen grain. That is, pollination is taking place. That is geitonogamy. In the case of xenogamy, the pollination will take place between two different plants of the same species. It is xenogamy. So based on the source of pollen grains, we have classified the pollination into three different categories: autogamy, geitonogamy, and xenogamy. This is how it can be represented. Next, in the plants, there are two different types of flowers. The flowers normally which we see in majority of the cases are actually chasmogamous flowers. Here chasmo is the open, whereas the gammas is actually marriage or the fusion or fertilization, you can say. So here actually the chasmogamous flowers means the open flowers. The flowers are always open. Whereas in the case of cleistogamous flowers, which you can find in certain species like viola or common pansy, oxalis plant, and in Commelina bengalensis, there are flowers which are actually always closed. Means the flowers will never open. Therefore, their reproductive parts will not be exposed to the external pollinating agents, and they are always closed only. Such kind of flowers are called cleistogamous flowers. So flowers are of two different types. So the importance of these cleistogamous flowers we'll see in the further discussion. Now coming to the agents of pollination, there are two different types basically. We have classified them into two different categories. One is abiotic agents, the other one is biotic agents, where the animals can help in the pollination process. Therefore, it is called zoophily. And in the case of abiotic agents, wind is one of the pollinating agent that is called anemophily that you can see in the maize. When water is the agent of pollination, it is called hydrophily. Again, it is of two different types. Epihydrophily that you can see in Vallisneria. Hypohydrophily can be seen in Zostera, that is seagrass. The zoophily is again classified into different types depending on which animal is actually involved in the pollination process. The first one is ornithophily, where the birds are the pollinating agents, which you can see in the bombax. Chiropterophily is the one where bats are the pollinating agents. This you can see in the Kaigelia africana. In malacophily, the molluscan species like snails, slugs will be the pollinating agents that you can see in lemna. And in entomophily, insects are the pollinating agents. Again, depending on which kind of insect is involved in the pollination process, it is classified into various categories. In that, the first one is melitophily, where bees are the pollinating agents. This you can see in Ophrys and Salvia. In Myrmecophily, ants are the pollinating agents that you can see in Polygonum cascadens. And in Psychophily, the butterflies will be the pollinating agents that you can see in Lantana. In Phelnophily, moths are the pollinating agents. This you can see in Yucca. In Canthrophily, beetles will be the pollinating agents. This you can see in Amorphophallus and Magnolia. So some important types of pollinating agents we'll discuss in detail. In that, the first one is in the abiotic agents. The most common kind of pollinating agent among the abiotic agents is wind. That is called anemophily. Majority of the grasses. So in grasses you can find this thing that is anemophily. Apart from that, in sugarcane, bamboo, maize, palm, coconut, in all these plants you can see this anemophily. So we'll just discuss about the important example from this, that is how the pollination anemophily occur in the maize. So when you just look into the maize plant, the maize plant is actually monoecious plant. That is, it possesses unisexual flowers only, but both male and female flowers are present on the same plant. Now here, this is the male inflorescences. Technically, it is tassel, whereas the female inflorescence is called cob. So in tassel, the male flowers are present. Here, the female flowers are actually aborted due to the some factors which we'll discuss in genetics. Whereas in the case of cob, the male flowers will be aborted. So the male inflorescence will possess only male and female inflorescence will possess only female flowers. That's how the plant will be. That's why it is monoecious plant. So unisexual flowers, but both male and female flowers are present on the same plant. That's how the plant will be. So in the pollination process, the pollen grains will be released from these flowers. The pollen grains are slightly heavy and they can move through the wind. So when there is a wind, they'll just fall vertically because they are slightly heavy or slightly away from that. This is how the pollination will be. So slightly away from that they can move depending on the wind. So it can reach the female inflorescence where the fertilization can occur. That's how the wind will help in the pollination process. So in grasses, basically you can find this kind of pollination process. And for this anemophily to be achieved, the flowers or the plant should have certain characteristics. So we'll just look into the characteristics of these plants. In that, the first thing is the inflorescence. In anemophilous plants will be catkin-like or spike inflorescence. the axis of inflorescence is usually elongated. See, this elongation is required for getting exposed to the wind. So whatever the characteristics that we'll see under different parts here, all these things have to help to get exposed to the wind. Therefore, there will be pollination. So this axis of inflorescence elongates. Therefore, the flowers will be exposed more to the wind. Therefore, the pollination will occur. Now, coming to the flowers produced before new leaves appear. See, if the new leaves appear, they can hinder the pollination process. Therefore, the flowers will appear before the new leaves appear. Therefore, again, there will be exposure to the wind when compared to the presence of leaves. Perianth is absent or highly reduced. See, perianth, again, that consists of sepals and petals and all. It is not required basically to attract the insects and all. So, usually it will be absent or maybe highly reduced. And the flowers are smaller. They need not to be larger again to attract the pollinating agents. Colorless, no need of colors, no scents, and no nectar at all. So, the flowers need not to possess all these things. Coming to the androecium, the stamens are numerous. That is, more number of stamens can be found. Well exposed with long filaments. So again, the long filaments can help in the exposure of the anther. Exerted and versatile. Exerted means again they are long. That is, they are well exposed. Versatile means if you just see the attachment of filament with the anther here, it is attached at the base. Therefore, the anther can move easily, which can again help in the anemophily. Now, pollen grains are light and non-sticky, so they need not to be sticky. Therefore, as they need not to attach with any kind of pollinating agents, so as they have to move through wind, they have to be light. So they are light and non-sticky. In the case of Urtica, the anthers will burst violently. Therefore, the pollen grains will be released into the air. Now, coming to the gynoecium, often have a single ovule in the ovary. One ovule is present in one ovary. And stigma is feathery. The feathery stigma again can help in the trapping of the pollen grains, as this is wind pollination. So when you just look into the stigma will be feathery like this, one feather like kind. So this thing can trap the pollen grains easily when compared to the stigma like this. So this can trap the pollen grains efficiently, as this is anemophily. So that's why it is feathery. Coming to the drawbacks of this, see, anemophily is always a chance event. The pollen grains are released into the air and they may or may not reach the stigma. So to increase the chance of that pollination, they have all these modifications, but still it is a chance event only. And as the number of pollen grains produced is more, the pollen grains will be always wasted. So the energy will be wasted for the production of pollen grains. And second kind of abiotic agent, hydrophily, where the water is the pollinating agent here. It's quite rare. So you don't find the hydrophily much in the angiosperms. It is limited to only 30 genera, most of which will be monocots. And in most of the aquatic plants, actually entomophily is found or anemophily is found. So it doesn't mean that when the plant is aquatic, it has hydrophily is a wrong statement. So even the aquatic plants, say for example, Eichhornia is there or maybe lotus is there, they don't perform hydrophily. So in most of the aquatic plants, it is actually insects and wind are the pollinating agents, not the water. Next, the hydrophily is of two different types. Epihydrophily, when it takes place on the surface of the water, epi is on surface. Hypohydrophily, when the pollination takes place within the water, that is below the surface, that is hypohydrophily. Pollen grains possess mucilage covering because they should avoid wetting. As the pollen grains are present inside the water, they have to avoid the wetting with the water. That's why they have one mucilage covering. So it's for the protection of the pollen grains basically. Now, one important example under this hydrophily is Vallisneria spiralis, where you can see the epihydrophily. So again, epihydrophily is on the surface. So the Vallisneria plant, basically it's one dioecious plant, that is, it's a unisexual plant. It is submerged. and it's a rooted hydrophyte. So it is submerged in the water. It is not the floating one, and it is rooted at the base. It is in the soil. It is actually rooted. So it's the Vallisneria's characteristic is. Now this is the female plant. The first one is the female plant, and the second one is the male plant. This is the male plant is. So in this, the female plant, when you just look into that, this is the female flower is. The female flower before fertilization will be on the surface of the water. Means the flower will be arranged on the surface of the water because of the long stalk that it possesses. The female flower is having one long stalk, because of which the female flower is present on the surface of the water. Now the male plant, here this is the male inflorescences. From this male inflorescence, the male flowers will be released. So they'll get detached from the parent plant and they'll be floating freely on the surface of the water. So this is the male flower, male flower. All these are the male flowers. They are freely flowing of the water on the water, and through passive movement. So along with the water, they'll be moving randomly in the water. Now this female flowers structure, when you just see, it possesses some uh, crevices, some kind of structures here, which can trap the male flowers. So the plant, the female flower consists of the structures which are able to trap the male flowers. So it's like this. So just roughly, if we just look into this, so here the male flower can get struck. So when it comes through the passive movement through the water, it can get stuck inside this female flower. Now the pollination can occur. So when this happens, this is the male flower is, and this is the female flower is. Now the pollination can occur. Once the pollination is completed, then this long stalk which is present here will be coiled. So it will be coiled. Therefore, the female flowers will be withdrawn into the water. That is, before fertilization, it will be floating on the surface of water. After the fertilization, it will be withdrawn into the water. So the remaining development will be in the submerged state only. So that's how the pollination in the Vallisneria will be. That's why this one is called epihydrophily, because the pollination is taking place on the surface of the water here. Next, coming to the hypohydrophily, this you can see in the Zostera. For example, Zostera marina, the common name of which is seagrass. So here the female flowers remain submerged, not floating as in the case of the Vallisneria. And the pollen grains are released directly into the water, and the pollen grains are usually long and ribbon-like. This can help in the free floating of the pollen grains within the water. So long ribbon-like pollen grains can help in the transport of pollen grains within the water. So this you can see in the case of Zostera marina. So this kind of pollination is hypohydrophily because it is taking place in the water. This can also be seen in the Ceratophyllum, and in epihydrophily can also be seen in the Elodia. Now coming to the next kind of pollination, that is biotic agents. Here, various animals like birds, bats, snails, insects, and even the larger animals like lemurs or arboreal rodents, means the tree-dwelling rodents, reptiles like gecko lizard or garden lizard, all these can help in the pollination process. Even the elephants also can help in the pollination process. And here the first kind which we are going to discuss in detail is the entomophily, where the insects are the pollinating agents. Here most of the insects, that is most of the entomophily is actually through the bees. So bees are most common type of biotic agents even in the entomophily. Often plants and insects are co-evolved. So there will be co-evolution. That is, when the plant evolves, the insect also will be evolved. And if the insect is evolved, again the plant will be evolved. So there is always a co-evolution between this plant and insect. So the relationship between the two different species, one plant species and one insect species is so close, therefore there will be coevolution of this. Now coming to the one important example under this entomophily, salvia, where actually the bees are the pollinating agents, that is melitophily can be seen. Here, a special kind of mechanism called liver mechanism can help in the pollination. So basically, when you just look into the flower consists of uh, this stamen and carpel, but the condition is basically protandrous. That is, the male reproductive system will develop first. Therefore, the self pollination, self hybridization will be prevented. The corolla is bilabiate and the anther has two lobes. This is important thing. This is the anther. This is one anther lobe. This is one anther lobe. In these two anther lobes, one is fertile one. The upper one is a fertile one. The lower one is a sterile one. And these two are connected by a long connective. This is the connectivis. And this is the filamentis. So this is one stamen completely. Filament, anther with two lobes with one long connective. Now when the insect visits the flower for the nectar which is present here, the insect will land on the sterile anther lobe. Here it will land. So when the insect lands on this sterile anther lobe, say here the insect is landed, then the sterile anther lobe will be pressed downwards. Therefore, this fertile anther lobe will be rubbed on the surface back of this insect. Therefore, the pollen grains will be sticked on the surface of the bee. Now, when this same bee visits another flower where the stigma is mature, the pollen grains sticked on the surface backside of this insect can be rubbed on the surface of the stigma in the other flower. Therefore, the pollination can occur. This you can see this figure. So this is how the flower is, and here the bee is visiting for the nectar. Therefore, the fertile anther lobe is getting rubbed on the surface backside of this bee, and when it visits another flower, you can see the stigma is also getting rubbed on the surface. Therefore, the pollen grains will stick on this stigma. This is how the pollination will be. That's why it is called liver mechanism. This particular part, that is this bilobed anther, is acting as one liver. That's why it is liver mechanism. The other kind of mechanisms which you can see in the entomophily are piston mechanism, which you can see in the Papilionaceae, and translator mechanism in Asclepiadaceae. Trap mechanism can be seen in the Aristolochia, and pitfall mechanism can be seen in the Arum. And coming to the characteristics, what kind of characteristics the plant should possess, particularly flowers should possess for achieving this entomophily. One thing is they have to attract the pollinating agents, that is insects. So they can attract the pollinating agents by having colors, or maybe providing nectar, or maybe providing the site for laying of eggs, or maybe from releasing certain kind of scents. So all these are various characteristics that you can see. So the flowers are usually larger. If they are not larger, the inflorescence will form. So the inflorescence is the group of flowers. So when you just look into the sunflower, for example, sunflower is actually one inflorescence. It's not the flower. So you can see various florets in the sunflower. So the sunflower is able to attract the insects. So they form the inflorescence. This you can see in the Asteraceae. Next, brightly colored. The flowers are brightly colored. Sometimes the adjacent parts, not just petals, the adjacent parts also can be colored. So, for example, in the case of bougainvillea, which is one common plant which you can see in our houses, where the bracts are actually colorful. This is actually bougainvillea. The colors that you see are actually because of bracts, not because of flowers. And this you can see in the poinsettia also. And the flowers release scents and nectar. In the case of flies and beetles, they'll get attracted with this foul odor, therefore they'll release foul odor. And some possess juicy cells, and pollen also can be provided as a nutrition to the insects, or the flowers may provide the sites for the laying of eggs, which you can see in Yucca amorphophallus, where the flower is about 6 feet long. So it's one of the longest flower you can see, and in fig also you can see this. So all these flowers will provide the site for laying of eggs. One more thing here in this earlier case, here you can see one flower from one orchid from Mediterranean region, that is Ophrys. It's one kind of orchid plant. See, the one which you see here is actually not the insect. This itself is the flower. This flower is actually resembling one insect, that is one kind of bee, bumblebee. This flower will possess a structure like this which resembles the female bees. Therefore, the male bees will be attracted to this, considering this as a female bee, and there will be pseudocopulation. Therefore, the pollination will occur. So this flower is actually not providing any kind of rewards like scents, nectar, or maybe pollen grain, nothing. It is not providing anything. Instead, it is simply cheating the male flower, therefore getting pollinated. It is called the sexual deceit, which you can see in the case of Ophrys. It's a kind of orchid. Now coming to the next kind of pollination, that is ornithophily, where the birds will help in the pollination. So here hummingbirds, maybe sunbirds or honey eaters, or maybe different other birds can help in the pollination here. And the one which you see in this figure is actually hummingbird sucking some nectar here. And coming to the plants can be bombax or maybe bignonia, sterlitzia, syncytium, or erythrina. In all these plants, you can see the ornithophily. Now coming to the characteristics of these flowers, like in the case of entomophily, here also they have to be larger to attract the birds, and tubular, cup or urn-shaped for access to the birds, brightly colored again to attract the birds. Usually scentless. Scents are not released. Instead, they'll provide the nectar and pollen because the birds will get attracted to the nectar and pollen as a part of their nutrition. Floral parts are tough and leathery. See, the flowers have to uh, bear this impact of the large birds. So to overcome that problem, the floral parts have to be tough and leathery. And apart from that, if bats are helping the pollination, it is called the Chiropterophily. So one of the example is Kigelia africana or Adamsonia digitata. And if molluscan species like snails and slugs are the pollinating agents, it is Malacophily, which you can see in Araceae and in the Lemna plant. Coming to the advantages and disadvantages of self-pollination and cross-pollination. In the case of self-pollination, see here the self-pollination means, once again if you just look into the types of pollination, we have seen three types of pollination: autogamy, geitonogamy, and xenogamy. See, autogamy is purely the pollination within the flower, but the geitonogamy, when you just look into that, it is genetically autogamy, sorry, self-pollination, because the pollination is within the plant only. That's why it is genetically it is self-pollination, but functionally it looks like one cross-pollination. So when I just talk about this self-pollination, this includes these two. Means whatever the advantages I'm talking about, this pollination will include autogamy as well as geitonogamy. Xenogamy is between two different members of the same species, means two different plants. That is cross pollination is. So when I say self pollination here, I'm talking about both of this. That is, I'm talking about the genetically self pollination, not functional one. So in the case of self pollination, there is assured seed set formation. See, as the stigma and style are closer. So when it is autogamy, when compared to this, the chances of autogamy will be more when compared to the geitonogamy, because here the style and stigma are closer. Therefore, the transfer of pollen grain will be very easier, more chances for the transport. But in the case of geitonogamy, comparatively this one is less chance. That is, in case of both autogamy and geitonogamy, when compared to the xenogamy, the assured seed set. Assured seed set means formation of seeds is guaranteed because of guaranteed fertilization, guaranteed pollination is there, and can help in the species where actually which are actually rarely distributed. See, when I just look into a particular geographical distribution of a particular species, see, the plants are distributed like this. And in other case, see, in this case, let me take the plants are distributed like this. That is, a particular species distribution is like this. So here in the second case, the distribution of the species, a particular species, is more dense. But here it is sparsely distributed. So in this case, the chance of pollination will be always high because the population, a particular species, is densely populated. But in this case, the plants are sparsely distributed. The distance between the different plants is more. The cross pollination chances will be less. So it can help when the species is rare in a particular region. Next, in the cases where cross-pollination fails, so in this case, for example, the chances for this cross-pollination to fail will be more, right? So therefore, there this self-pollination can help. So as this self-pollination need not to depend on the pollinating agents, it will depend obviously, but it need not to depend in some cases. Therefore, the self-pollination chances will be more when compared to cross-pollination. Next, coming to the disadvantages of this. Continuous self-pollination may lead to weaker progeny. See, we might have you might have studied earlier, that is, the marriages among the close relatives may lead to some kind of genetic disorders. That is because of the increased homozygosity. So this particular aspect of this self-pollination or self-hybridization we'll discuss in genetics part and all. But basically, the self-pollination, self-hybridization will lead to increased homozygosity, which may lead to the weaker progeny. See, we'll see one concept called inbreeding depression, where continuous inbreeding, that is self-pollination, will lead to depression of yield and its characteristics. Next, no much variation. So self-pollination will not lead to variations. So no much variations. Therefore, new species may not form. So it cannot help in the evolution process. Coming to the cross-pollination, it will always bring much healthier offspring, which is called hybrid vigor. So hybrids will have certain superior characteristics, that is called hybrid vigor. Germination capacity is better because of this increased vigor. Variations are generated that can help in the evolution. Coming to the disadvantages of cross pollination, it is always uncertain. When compared to the self pollination, it is uncertain as it is depending on the external agents. Should attract various pollinating agents. So these are all the advantages and disadvantages of both self pollination and cross pollination. So both are having their own advantages as well as disadvantages. So with respect to the self pollination, the important advantage is increased chances of pollination and assured seed set formation. And coming to the cross pollination, it will lead to the variation and can help in the species survival. So some plants may have the adaptations for self pollination and some may have adaptations for the cross pollination. Those adaptations we'll see in detail. So first one is adaptations for the self pollination include cleistogamy. So already we have seen here the flowers are always closed. So as the flower is always closed, there is always chances for the self pollination. So not in this case. So in this Commelina bengalensis case, this is actually the chasmogamous flower, whereas underground you can find the cleistogamous flowers. This is the chasmogamous flower and this is the cleistogamous flower. So in this always there is more chances for the fertilization, self-fertilization. So this is cleistogamy use. Next, coming to the homogamy, when stamens and carpels mature at the same time. So when the flower is bisexual and both stamen as well as carpel are maturing at the same time, there is more chances for the self-pollination, that is homogamy use. Next, this you can see in the Mirabilis jalapa as well as Catharanthus roseus. And in the case of incomplete dichogamy, the maturation will be in different times. So the male reproductive system and female reproductive system are maturing in two different times. But if you take this is the maturing time for the male and this is the maturing time for the female, somewhere there will be overlap between these two time periods. Here, self pollination will be more. That is incomplete dichogamy is. Now coming to the adaptations for the cross pollination, there are so many important adaptations here. So these cross pollination adaptations are also called outbreeding devices because cross pollination is also called outbreeding. Next, contrivances means again adaptations only. So contrivances for cross pollination. First one is monoecious and dioecious conditions. So in both the cases, the flowers are unisexual. In case of monoecious, the plant possesses male flowers and the female flowers. In the case of dioecious, one plant will possess male flowers, the other plant will possess female flowers. That is, male and female plants are different. But in both the cases, the flowers are unisexual only. So, therefore, the chances for the self-fertilization will not be there. So, always there will be cross-fertilization only, or maybe geitonogamy. But basically, there is more chances for this. So, in the case of monoecious, no autogamy, geitonogamy and xenogamy is possible. And in the case of dioecious plant, only xenogamy is possible. Geitonogamy is also not possible. So examples are this. In monoecious, coconut, bitter gourd, maize, castor are the examples for this. Dioecious, borassus, carica papaya, that is papaya plant, date palm. Date palm. Now dichogamy. Here, the male and female reproductive systems will be matured in a different times. So the flower is bisexual, but the maturation of these two parts will occur in two different times. So if a male reproductive system, that is androecium, mature first, that condition is called protoandry. Prot is first, andro refers to male, androecium. So protoandry means first male reproductive system is mature. This you can see in Helianthus and Clerodendron. The one which is shown here is Clerodendron plant. And in the case of protogyny, the gynoecium will mature first, followed by the androecium. Again, therefore, there will not be self-pollination. So this you can see in Scrophularia nodosa, the one which is shown here is that, and Aristolochia bracteata. Here also you can see the protogyny. And in the case of hercogamy, hercos is the barrier. So there is some barrier that is not allowing the pollen grains to reach the stigma. So here the flowers are bisexual only, but some kind of barrier is present for this self-pollination. That's why it is hercogamy. Hercos is barrier. See, in the case of gloriosa, this flower is actually Gloriosa superba flower. Here, this is the stigma is, and these are the anthers are. So the direction of the anthers and stigma are slightly different. Therefore, the chances for the self-pollination will be decreased. There may be self-pollination, but the chances are decreased. So that's how the cross-pollination can happen in these flowers. This can also be seen in the hibiscus, that is China rose also. Next one is in the case of heterostyly. Here hetero is different, styly is styles. So here stamen and stigma, that is the style. The length of the style and the length of the filament will be different. That is heterostyly conditions. So in the case of distyly, there are two different sizes of styles. So we'll just look into one example, primula. This is the primula plant is. So in one kind of flower, one kind of plant, you can see long style. This is the long styles. Whereas in the second case, you can see the short style. So in the plant with long style, you can see shorter stamen. Whereas in the plant with the shorter style, you can find the anther's position is different. It's not about the long anther, but the position is entirely different. Therefore, the pollen grain from this to this, chance of this is more when compared to this. In the same way, the chance of this pollen grain to get transported to this will be decreased. It may happen again, but it will be decreased. So therefore there is cross pollination. This is distyles. So the plants produce two types of flowers like this. So the first kind of flower is pin flower, which consists of long style, long stigmatic papillae, short stamens, and small pollen grains. Whereas the thrumide, this one is a thrumide flower is where the style is shorter, stigmatic papillae is small, long stamens you can find. You can see the long stamens, and large pollen grains can be found. In case of Lathyrus, there is tristyle. That is, the plants can produce three types of flowers with respect to the style length. So in the first case, there is long style. This is the long style. So when the flower consists of long style, the anthers may be of the medium height or maybe shorter. And in the flower with the normal style, the anthers either are longer or shorter. No, the medium sized anthers here, that is stamens here. The same way, in the third case, the style is shorter. In this flower, there will not be short stamens. The stamens will be either medium sized or longer only. Like this, three types of flowers are present in the plant. Now, the pollen grain from the flowers of one type, say in this, can pollinate only the other two types. So from this, it can pollinate. This is the medium sized filament. When I just look into this, from this, the pollen grains can be transported onto this flower or this flower. That is, pollen grain from the flowers of one type can pollinate only other two types, not the same type. This is not possible. The same way from this, the pollen grain can be transported onto this or maybe onto this, but not onto this. The same way here also. This you can see in the case of Lathyrus plant. This is the tristyle. So both distyle and tristyle are increasing the chances of cross fertilization, cross pollination. And the last one is self incompatibility. See, compatibility, incompatibility. When you just look into that, say for example in grafting, in tissue grafting, for example in human or blood transfusion. So for example, tissue grafting, when I just take, my tissue is compatible to me. That is, compatibility means the other tissue is not compatible. So in the case of grafting, tissue grafting, you can see self compatibility. Self is compatible, non-self is incompatible. The reverse is here. That is self incompatibility, which means the pollen grains from the same plant. It is not just about the same flower, but same plant are incompatible, which means autogamy and geitonogamy will be prevented. So when this is the stigma, this stigma will not allow the pollen grain from the same plant. So as the pollen grain is self, this is self incompatibility. So always there is no autogamy as well as geitonogamy. This you can see in Abutilon and Passiflora. So the genetic basis of this self incompatibility will discuss in the genetics part. So this is what the different types of pollinations and advantages and disadvantages of pollination process. In the next lecture, we are going to discuss about the next part, that is fertilization. Later, we'll look into the post-fertilization events. So thank you very much for your attention.